Today I'm going to go over how I started my research inquiry essay. So first I started thinking of communities that I was involved in, and I came up with two main ones. One was my work community at Panera, and then another one was an online community that I was a part of on Discord. Discord's a social media platform that many gamers use to meet in groups called servers. I used this server because it had more characteristics of a community that Swales listed than I thought my work community did, so that's why I chose this community. And here is how I started my research for it.
So I first started off my research by going to Advent's library page, and I looked up discourse communities, and I made sure I put online because my community was online, so I wanted to see if there were any good articles on that. And then what I did was I made sure it was full text, it was peer-reviewed, so it was well-cited sources, and also I like reading journal articles, so I made sure that I put that through my filter. And then I found a few different articles and went through them. And I finally came upon this one, which is called Computers in Human Behavior. I really liked this article because it went through online communities and studies on online communities, so I thought that was a really good source. So before I actually start writing, I come up with a skeleton draft. Obviously, I'm going to have an introduction. And then this is my first body paragraph. It's going to be introducing my community, which is my Discord server. And it's got some questions that I am going to cover in that section. My second body paragraph is going to be about things that I'm learning about my community. How do we communicate, and our lexies and things like that. And also questions that I'm going to be left with. I'm also going to go over a body paragraph 3 with online versus in-person communities, because many think that online communities aren't valid. And so I'm going to talk about how we differentiate from in-person and some studies and why we are as important as in-person communities. And obviously I will have a conclusion. So that is going to be my skeleton draft that I will base my paper off of.
So the next project we have to work on is starting our research proposal. I started this off by thinking of what topics I really wanted to research on my online discourse community, and the main one that I picked that I thought was going to be really helpful for my community online was how online communities differ from in-person communities. I also did want to find the similarities, but the main reason why I wanted to focus on the differences was so that I could improve my online community based off of what in-person communities have that we probably don't.
So I started to figure out how I'm going to form my paper by using a skeleton draft again. So obviously I'm going to have an intro that's going to introduce my topic as well as what Discord is again, and then I'm also going to talk about my community in this one. And then my body paragraph, it's going to be how online versus in-person communication is different. I'm going to discuss it, what's the focus of it. I've got a specific research question I'm going to fill in this one, and what my plan is for it. And then same thing for the relationships online. I want to discuss how relationships online differ or are similar from in-person relationships and what is my focus on that. I'm going to give my research question that's going to help me keep the focus on the relationships and what my plan is to approach it. And then my method is going to be an interview setup, so who am I interviewing, questions I'm going to ask, and scheduling. Lastly, I'm going to go over sources that I found, basically going through how I'm going to plan my whole research paper with these sources, how I'm going to use them, and why I chose them. And then I'm going to have a conclusion kind of tying up all of the ideas that I presented in this proposal. This is the paragraph where I proposed my sources. I found my sources based off of these topics, and then I put them into this document in the order that I wanted to discuss them in my paper.
Now, after writing my research inquiry as well as my research proposal, I am ready to write my research paper. In this paper, I really wanted to cover what my online community was, as well as what Discord is that my online community meets on. And for my sources, I used my annotated bibliography, but I edited it so that I had beginning with which sources I wanted to start with and going into the topics that I wanted to cover with those sources. And then I also used a skeleton draft to help me stay on track.
This is my annotated bibliography. As you can see, it's not in alphabetical order, but it's instead in topics that I wanted to cover. So I've got my communication topics that I found for online communication, as well as relationship topics that I found for online relationships. I also found interview methods that I wanted to use. This is the main skeleton draft that I wanted to use for my online versus in-person research paper. So I wanted to do the intro, and that was very important because I wanted to make sure people understood what a discourse community was, what my community was, and then what Discord is. I also really wanted to make sure I stayed on track with my communication, relationships, and then going into my methods because I wanted to explain these first before I went into my interview. And lastly, I ended it with a conclusion. I got rid of this one because I didn't feel like it was relevant. Lastly, I had to make sure that all of my sources with direct quotes had sections out of them. So this is me changing one of them to a section and making sure that I had all my sections for my other quotes. So those are all of the methods that I use, including the skeleton draft and edited annotated bibliography, as well as all the little tips that I do when I'm writing papers. Thank you. Bye.